Hello, this is Talking Devils, the leading independent Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined as always by Manchester United legend Paul Parker to talk over a mixed week at United. If you're watching the video, please like and subscribe. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to get your questions and comments in so we can discuss them during the show. If you're watching the replay, say hello, feel free to comment. We do reply to all the comments that we get, or most, if we flag them and see them in time. And if you're listening back on the audio podcast, please be sure to give us a review on the platform you're listening on and subscribe, obviously, as well. Paul, two very frustrating games at Old Trafford to discuss this week. Two occasions where really you don't expect anything different from the opposition. I'm trying to be careful with the way that I word these because I don't want to be condescending or patronising. Because I genuinely don't mean it. I can understand why teams play the certain way. We'll talk about Ammonia first of all. Great travelling support. They brought a great number, and they were loud. They were fantastic. I was a little bit surprised by Neil Lennon because they were as defensive at Old Trafford as they were opportunistic on their own pitch. You know, they really went for it. They gave it a good go, but they played with effectively a back six. The goalkeeper Ozoa had the game of his life. Great performance from him. I'm always curious with these game of their lives from goalkeepers because you watch it and in the sort of like 90 minutes when the game's transpiring, you're like, oh my god, is anything going to beat this goalkeeper? And then you go and watch it back. For example, I always remember Schmeichel at Newcastle, and if you watch that game back, there aren't a number of great saves in it. What's the good thing about the goalkeeping is the positioning, the way that he makes it look simple, the calm that he gave the defense, and all that sort of stuff. When you watch the highlights back, there aren't that many outstanding saves from Uzoa that you think, oh, they were outstanding. You know, like that save was outstanding. Maybe the first one from Rashford, but apart from that, you might put it down to poor finishing. And success in the game eventually came through perseverance and an introduction of a different threat, because I think what really did for them in the end, because they were very resilient, they were very organised, they concentrated, they were very disciplined. But when you bring on the different threats in a game like that, and a team's got something different to concentrate on, like Eriksen comes on, he creates things. Sancho is obviously, up and down at the moment, but he's still a different threat. McTominay is a very different kind of player to the other midfielders that we had. And sometimes even that difference in the way that it changes the players' levels of concentration, which need to be on point for 90 odd minutes, can do for it. And I think I'm not trying to do United too much of a disservice because they did keep going for it. And it was an evening of frustration and patience. But when I'm trying to calculate what exactly made the change, it was probably just that, wasn't it? They put on some different bodies. It gave the Cypriots something different to think about, and in that moment, United just kept knocking and finally found the way through.
I think we have to say that the, the difference in quality of the individuals made a difference. Really, that's what it was about more than anything. And they held on as long as it was 0-0. They were going to keep fighting. And when you come against these sides, it's so important to score that first goal as early as possible.
Yeah.
As early to put them back on their heels, really.
Yeah.
So and it never materialised.
I'm sure everyone in that stadium was just panicking, edgy about it. Were they gonna break away? Were they gonna go and nick a goal? But like you said, you do have maybe different players, different threats. Generally, you don't bring on Scott McTominay to win a game of football. It's not the normal thing you'd normally do, but he goes and does it. There was a lot of bodies in the box, and they were defending for their lives. And in a certain way, you feel, you should feel sorry for them. But if you actually come to a ground and you start with your whole thing is about being negative and really showing no aspirations to go out and score a goal, sometimes, as far as I'm concerned, you deserve what you get in the end. But still, given even Manchester United's levels at this moment, they should be doing better than what they
Yeah.
did. And that's the most disappointing thing. And as we saw with yesterday, creativity is a problem because creativity was sitting on the bench in the Europa League game, and creativity wasn't there for 90 minutes yesterday because there was a home ill. And again, it's a big problem for Manchester United.
Yeah, let's talk about Newcastle there. Newcastle, you're right. First and foremost, from a United perspective, they didn't create enough. They weren't aggressive enough, perhaps in certain moments. And when you draw a game 0-0 at home, then the onus is on you, and you've got to look at yourself in the mirror. But I'm not making any excuses for United at all. But if you look at Newcastle, they played with such ambition against Man City, and yesterday we did see a team that was bordering on ridiculous. They were throwing themselves to the ground all the time, wasting time, and there were some terrible refereeing decisions that we'll get to as well. On one occasion, though, it was in the second half, they stopped the game for treatment, and as soon as the game was about to resume, another Newcastle player dropped down. It was like, how is that? I mean, I'm 41, Paul, and I've never seen anything as ridiculous as that. Do you think that? I know that they're playing a game or whatever. The onus is on United to break them down, and we'll talk about United in a moment. But what did you make of sort of Newcastle's approach yesterday?
I've seen it all before. I think you remember if I actually come out and say a team to you, if you can remember about it, because everyone seems to remember once, and then they get relegated. Is Bournemouth?
Yeah,
that's what Bournemouth do. And you look where their management team come from, and that says it all. And that's what they do. Bournemouth did it every single game. The moment Bournemouth, and be honest, if they'd have gone 1-0 up Newcastle, then it would have been worse than what it was. That's what an Eddie Howe team do. As much as he comes, you see him on TV, and he's like this blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, smiley, and looks everything. His approach is very much kill time, which is really in theory killing our football at this moment.
Yeah.
Football is not entertaining in the Premier League as such with certain teams the way they want to play. People are scared of losing games, and we see now there's a World Cup in Christmas. It means that teams are reacting a lot quicker than they normally would with the fact of decisions about managers. So everyone is scared to lose that 1-2 on the bounce is really bad now in the Premier League. So it's that negativity we're seeing. And I really don't see it. Maybe it's my age, and thank you for mentioning that you're only 41, by the way, a bit uncalled for. But I don't know. I'm watching that, and I'm seeing people go down, and I'm getting so frustrated because people are going down when you know there's been no contact. I don't see how they can do it. How you can actually do that yourself as a man, how you can do it. When you get kicked in the shin, you go down holding your head. I don't know. People say, oh, the managers tell them to do it, they practice it in training. Of course you can't practice that in training. It'd be embarrassing if it was like that. People would have taken pictures already to go and that. So it's just the players, and that's the way that football is. But there used to be that time, and I keep talking about it, and I blow the dust off the stories at some point, is that when you wouldn't go down because you didn't want to show that person that they had hurt you. There was that time in football, which was everywhere, all levels. But Wayne, I watch non-league football when I'm not working at a game or been invited to a game on professional level, and non-league football is exactly the same. They're replicating everything that happens at football we see on the TV, and down to the fainting injuries to the fact of sacking managers, the way they're doing it. And so it's not making sense at this, the circus level, as I call it, and it's making no sense at all in the grassroots levels as well, why managers are going. So it's strange, and it's totally wrong. I get embarrassed by it, I get incensed by it when I'm doing my work on the radio. If a player's there and I see him go down, I don't just turn around and say, he's doing what anyone would do. I say, no, that fella's cheating, because
Yeah.
it is cheat. It is cheating. There's no point. Referees keep falling for it because they're scared to make a decision, because they're worried that if he does, go out and he has got a head problem, is he going to get sued? Is people going to have a go at him in the street? Because that's where it is now. People want to bully people after a game of football. So it's tough on certain referees, and I say certain referees because there's still those few referees who are enjoying that moment. It's like it's their traffic warden moment when they think they're in charge. They've got a uniform on, straight their shoulders, and they think that's them. They're in a position of command.
Yeah. We'll talk about the referee in a minute, and we'll circle back to Newcastle with that. But I do want to, we've got to talk about United, and the onus was on them to break down that resolve, and the fact that Newcastle weren't as unadventurous as Ammonia. They were trying to attack, and the set pieces were, they were rolling the ball and having Trippier lump it long and all that. That was happening. They were trying to score goals, but they were so compact in defence. And the fact of the matter is, it seems sometimes like United were playing to their own weaknesses. That obviously you've got Ronaldo as a static forward, and his supply line is Anthony and Sancho, who they were too predictable cutting in. They knew they were going to cut in, which is fine. But the fullbacks were coming into the middle as well. They weren't going out on the overlap or anything. So you're making the pitch more compact. There was no little creativity in there. Fernandes, the player who you would presume is going to bring it, and it was too compact even for him to make a difference if he was on song. But especially when you've got a player like Fred as well in that situation, and Fred excels in the big games where he's breaking up the play and passing the ball on. But in a game like that where you need patience and you need good decisions, and patient decisions and wise decisions, you have Fred who isn't patient and he's prone to rash decisions. And I'm not calling him out. He played poorly, but even the game plan from the manager seemed a bit, everything seemed to be in the middle. There was no utilising any of the spaces around, and it really didn't help. It didn't really seem to be United playing to their strengths yesterday. What they did have, because obviously they didn't have Eriksen, so they needed to find solutions from elsewhere, and it just seemed like United were compounding their own issues. And still, even though all that happened, Rashford comes on, and Fred and Rashford have these massive chances to win the game. Where do you stand? And we've looked a lot about on Ten Hag's decisions and his squad choices and his team selections. Obviously, a little bit hamstrung yesterday because Martial's injured and Eriksen was ill. But in terms of what he had and the way that we set up, do you think that is it one way you can sort of say that he should have made an extra change? He should have done something a little bit different, because it was obvious about 60 minutes in that it wasn't working.
Well, you mentioned it at the top of what you just said there, is that two wingers, two wide players who were cutting in, and they knew what United were doing. Well, the change he should have made was, put Anthony on the left for 5 minutes and put Sancho on his right foot and see. I thought Anthony may have been United's best player.
Yeah.
Just by the fact you thought, there's something that might happen. Every time he got in great areas, he was trying to cross with the outside of his left foot. That works now and again, but you just knew that you needed something that was always going to go that little bit deeper. Everything he hit was always to the front of the goal. It never went to the back of the goal. It never offered an opportunity for Ronaldo to jump with anybody. Every time he did go, there was only Ronaldo running into the box. There wasn't anyone else.
Yeah.
If you could look it back, and I can still remember it, 4 or 5 times he got the other side of Dan Burn, which is tough work, by the way, and he'd done it on quite a few occasions. And it was only Ronaldo. There wasn't a midfield player running in that box, and it was quite poor. When you look at Fernandes, who's supposed to be maybe doing that, Fred will always try and do that, but Fernandes was the one who should have been joining Ronaldo. He wasn't when it was needed most, when Anthony had got the other side of Dan Burn. But you just wonder, could Anthony have gone to the other side and then seeing how it affected Trippier, in the sense of Trippier, as he does, he tries to make himself a focal point. In other words, he's a bit busy. He's got a very, very, high about himself. That that he can control things from that right back position. Put Anthony up against him and see how well he does with someone who wants to run the other side of him. Stop him trying to dictate a game of football from where he is. Force him back. Don't allow him to step forward, which he wouldn't have done because he wouldn't have liked the pace of Anthony. Yeah. And that's the first time I've really seen that pace. And then get Sancho with his movement with the ball, trying to tie those long legs of Dan Burn. Tie him up, or see if he could get round the other side of him and put crosses in with his right foot, so they're coming away from the goal for Ronaldo to attack. And he never done that. I think there was maybe the opportunity to try something different from the bench as well, just to change it up. And again, it did need, both sides really did need to change it up, but Newcastle were never going to change because for them it was a competent away performance. Yeah. I said it, they'll walk away, and they definitely walked away the better, more happy of the two sides. I just think it got quite stale, and when they did allow United to have the ball, United kept getting it. How many times did they go back over the halfway line with it when initially they was on the edge of their box? Yeah. And I think a lot of that, and I'm going to say this, and if people want to moan about it, I think they've got to understand that prior to everything we've been through in the last 2 years, I'm still allowed an opinion. It's not called an agenda, it's called an opinion. And then I'm going to try and explain why I'm saying it. So it's not about one person, but it's about that one person is frustrating. And it is Fernandes. And if those people want to watch a game and see what Fernandes does and how that game was, it needed Fernandes to become Manchester United's creative force. But what he went and done when the game slowed down, he went and stood on the same line as Ronaldo and where Anthony was playing and where Sancho was playing. So you end up with 4 players on the back line, and Newcastle defenders just closed in, and they just virtually said, try and play the ball into them. And Fernandes wasn't helping his teammates because every time he was showing up and putting his arms in the air, he never knew that there was a player standing directly behind him. But what he does, he throws his arms up in the air. And that's every time, that's what he kept doing. So every commentator would have been saying, oh, he's getting frustrated. But it's in a manner that it's that player's fault with the ball at his feet. It's not their fault. They can't give the ball to someone with 3 players around him, who at the moment, if they give it to him and he loses it, they're counter-attacking and hitting a defence which is quite spread out because they've got the ball. Yeah. They're trying to keep the ball. So he needed to pull out, may have dragged someone with him, and needed to get on the ball because he was maybe the most creative player, or allegedly, in that team without Eriksen now in that central role. So it was a big problem. And Fernandes is a problem at this moment in time, the way United are playing. I just don't know how you can get the best out of him at this moment in time, because he wants. Go on, sorry.
No, he did. Like the observation that you made there, it was one that I was thinking about in the second half. It seemed like he was playing as a striker alongside Ronaldo, and I was like, "That's not your responsibility. You've got to be back, especially at this moment in time, because we're not creating anything." You're absolutely right with that.
Yeah, but I don't mind it because he generally ends up in that position because he makes a run forward again. He's running and he's throwing his arms up in the air like my 16-month-old granddaughter. He's running like that, trying to say, give me the ball. You couldn't give him the ball because the defence was so tight. But the moment he makes that run, his body language is, and he stands there then. And then he's in that line. He doesn't try to come round and try and say, right, okay, I'm going to go and do it. I'm going to go and try something else. I just want him not to be so selfish and about himself. I want him, he's wearing the armband, which means he's captain, earn that respect to being a captain and talk to people. Try and be positive with people. When you make a run, they don't give it to you, then go and make another run. But don't throw your arms up and saying, like you're saying to 74,000 Manchester United fans, it's not my fault, they didn't give me the ball.
Yeah.
Because that kind of attitude generally, and again, I'm going to say, back when I was playing, would have got a proper captain with his fist and his arm round your throat, twisting your shirt and saying, "Do not go and make your teammates look like idiots."
Yeah.
Which was poor. So I'll say this again for the people who think that I've got an agenda. I haven't got an agenda. I'm just picking out things, and normally it's the same player, and everyone is seeing it. It's not good. It's not good at all, because thinking as a player, as an ex-player, thinking how the modern day footballer is today, is that they're not happy. They're not happy with that man and the way he's conducting themselves. And some of them are saying, "Why has he got the armband?" They would never say it. They'll come out and say all the usual stuff. "Oh, he's a great captain. He's this, he's that." They won't tell you the truth because someone's got a camera in their face, someone's going to write it down, or someone's got a mic. It's going to go. But they're not. They can't be happy with him and the way he conducts himself on the field as a captain.
Yeah, it's a tough one because you don't know how much of it. The issue is the direction, right? Because you don't know if this is Bruno doing his own thing, like, you know, does he like to take up that position as a second striker, or is this the direction from the manager? And you would presume it's got to be the latter, that Ten Hag's telling him to do it, but
He doesn't. Wayne, I'm not a coach. I'm not, but I know that the moment he makes that run into there, and he doesn't come off, there's not a ball played through. He's got to step away, and he's got to step and virtually become the playmaker again. Brian
Yeah.
Robson used to make those kind of runs. If Robbo didn't get the ball, he wouldn't just suddenly stay in. Once that passage of play had stopped and the ball had come out, Robbo would then position himself so he's facing the goal again, so he could see what's going to happen next, and he could make play happen again. That's what Robbo would do. That's what Roy would have done in his prime. Paul Ince would have done exactly the same. I mean, you look at Scholesy. Scholesy used to make the odd, but Scholesy would come out and look to face the play because that was a strength. Back to play, standing there waiting for the ball isn't the strength of those players I've named, nor is it a strength of Fernandes either. So on Ten Hag isn't telling him to do that. He is doing that off his own back.
Yeah. It's interesting because Scholes was he did he's been doing a couple of podcasts with Gary Neville lately, and I watched one of them, and he was talking about receiving the ball on the half turn, and, you know, you don't often see midfielders do that, and you definitely don't see the United midfielders do that, and maybe that's something to look at. Let's get on to the referee, Craig Pawson. So there was a possible penalty on Wilson in the first half. Now, that looked like a shoulder barge from Varane, and in the second half, Rashford was knocked over with a shoulder barge, and the referee, he very clearly indicated, look, that was a shoulder. Do you know what I mean? So that was the rule that he was taking with that. All right, fair enough. There was a penalty appeal on Sancho when the leg came round. On first viewing, I thought it was a penalty. On second viewing, I wasn't so sure, but then I saw the angle where there's definite contact and he's sort of knocked down. So I don't understand why that one wasn't given on appeal. And then the Ronaldo, I don't know if I don't know how to call it a disallowed goal, because Pawson blows and the kick is taken from the player. And Newcastle played this game you will know, you watched it. They played this routine was played throughout the 90 minutes where one player would just roll the ball and then either Trippier would lump it long or the goalkeeper would lump it long. The ball was in play and that's how they played it. So that was their technique of playing that all game. So if the ball's in play from the minute the referee's blown his whistle and the player's kicked it, Ronaldo's entitled to score that goal. And I don't understand how the referee can say that that's not a goal. I honestly, that's one of the, and we all remember Roy Carroll, his wonder save against Spurs, where he somehow clawed the ball out from behind the line, and we still don't know how he managed to do it. But that's up there with, and you might see this very differently, Paul, because you might see it as like, it's just one of those things. But I thought it was a ludicrous decision. I don't know how the referee has got the temerity. I somewhat understand why he didn't give the Sancho pen, because he's probably thinking, I should have given that Wilson one, and he's equaling it out because that's what referees do. But the Ronaldo one, I can't get my head around it. Beyond that, he obviously didn't have a great control on the game, considering the way that the Newcastle players were falling down. What did you make of those big calls yesterday? Because for me, they seemed, and I don't know if I'm just like reacting like I'm a bit annoyed as a United fan and we didn't break them down, and that would have been the difference between winning and losing. Maybe I'm a bit grumpy about that, considering the way that they played as well. What did you make of the decisions?
I wouldn't say I was 100% on both of those. The Wilson one, I felt Varane and I think it was Shaw, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Both of them made a little bit of a pig's ear of that indecision. Could the referee have given that? I don't think there was a big enough Varane stepped across him. There wasn't big enough one there to give that as a penalty. The one with Sancho, no. If anything, he overcooked it when he went down. Overcooked it. There wasn't anything natural in the way he went down. When in theory as well, he should have maybe done something with the ball a lot earlier. He dallied on the ball for too long, and looking on the other side of it when he had an opportunity to take a shot or put someone in. But both of those challenges, and I always say this, is that if they're outside the box, they'll be given a fouls.
Yeah.
There's a different kind of foul needed in the box. Strange, but so it's true. It's a different kind of foul. The Ronaldo one, I called it a goal. I called it a goal. And that time, there was a referee's whistle. There's a referee's whistle. If the goalkeeper had picked the ball up, I think there was a good pick the ball up to put it somewhere more comfortable where he wanted it. I think there's every chance a referee could have booked the goalkeeper for handball.
Yeah.
But definitely that ball was played to play the game again. And as you said, I did find it strange how Newcastle always kept every free kick was always touched. Even from the goal kicks, they touched it to the goalkeeper.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Strange system, but that's what they always done. And Ronaldo, being clever, being quite sharp, and loving to score goals, saw an opportunity to go and do something. And the moment he stood there, I thought to myself, why does he look like that? I thought to myself, that's a bit strange. He looks like does he think it's like indirect or something that he can maybe go and nick it off the second one? It seemed a bit strange, but he didn't. And you watch it, and you've seen it, Wayne, and I've watched it again, and I've watched what he's doing, and he was like creeping. He's creeping there, and he knew it. He'd read the situation. The only problem, as far as I'm concerned, is that the referee bottled the situation.
Yeah, massively.
I think he bottled the situation, referee, and he just went with what he thought. Well, he was just giving it back to him. I'll be interested today when I watch it I watch it after this show we're doing. I'll watch it on Ref Watch and see what's said in there. The in-house referee says on there about it. But I don't see why. It doesn't make sense why he didn't give that goal, and it didn't make even more sense why he booked Ronaldo.
Yeah.
After that, it was just, it wasn't as if he was running out the wall trying to kicking the ball away. Yeah. He's gone there generally believing that. So that's the problem with referees. Referees now have become robots. Referees now, majority of them now, their game is run by that machine on the halfway line or wherever it is in a football ground. Referees are not refereeing. They know they've got to get out in people in the studio who are watching the game, and they're making decisions for them.
Yeah.
So referees are not making their own decisions and standing by them now. They're not being men, to be perfectly honest. And I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, by the way. But they're not. They're not making their own decision, Wayne.
It's not about being men. It's about being your own person and making that decision. Yeah. That's what you mean. And you're right. It's just he did massively bottle that. I can't. It wouldn't be. I would be the first person, even in my grumpiness of United not winning, if they hadn't played like that all the game, then I'd be like, all right, well, the referee he blew, but it wasn't clear because. That maybe he was just touching the ball to him, but that was their game plan. They were doing it all the game. That it was clearly taken out, and how he didn't take that. How no one actually spoke to him in this day and age when you've got all that technology. No one talked to him, and then to book Ronaldo for protesting because he made the mistake sums up today's referees because they think if they double down on it, that way, it's avoiding the thing. And it's ridiculous. Honestly, I just, and United are culpable. United are culpable because, they should have scored other than that, or they should have tried to create. They don't have a divine right to win. The other thing is, like, I know Eddie Howe is there doing what Eddie Howe does. He's quite happy to be in this job as, I guess, a stopgap until they properly challenge him for something, because he knows he's not going to be there when they challenge him for the Champions League. I just think, like, you can look at, and a lot of Newcastle fans are getting a little bit uppity about it, and there are a lot knocking on my door on Twitter this morning because I'm complaining about the decisions. But it's like they've suddenly got a voice, like, after years, because the club's been sport washed into accepting this, and it's like, wow, I watched them play against City early in the season, and they were so entertaining. And then, don't get me wrong, they were kind of time wasters when they came to Old Trafford last season until we scored. But like yesterday was very, very peculiar. One nice thing out of the game, I guess, David De Gea kept a clean sheet. It was his 500th appearance, so it's a landmark for him. He's extending his record as the second most appearances from a goalkeeper behind Alex Stepney. Alex Stepney recently turned 80, so they introduced them before they came to each other. De Gea should pass Stepney's appearance record this season, and after early season shakes, he looks like he's kind of getting on board with Ten Hag style of play, apart from this incessant tendency to play these goal kicks short, which we're still doing as we did yesterday. Anyway, so we'll talk about Spurs then. Spurs are the next game. We play them at Old Trafford on Wednesday, 8:15 kickoff. Absolutely fantastic. Said nobody at all. Just one defeat for Spurs all season at Arsenal. Other than that, they've been very consistent. Paul, Kane's in good form at the moment. Son's in good form always anyway. So they're looking tricky. The good for Spurs is that Conte's got them looking more resolute than what you would normally associate a Spurs side being. Obviously you watch Spurs a lot. What do you make of them? What do you reckon of the task that's facing United on Wednesday?
They're boring. They're bland. I mean, they've lost to Arsenal. There hasn't been many games that they have deserved to win, to be perfectly honest. You mentioned about Harry Kane. Harry Kane has scored goals. That's all that Harry Kane has done, because his general play has been poor.
Okay.
We've seen that, and as much as everybody wants to say it, and I'm sure other people will see things differently, he's not really the threat. The threat is Son, really. He's the threat. He's the one who had not a poor start. It just wasn't there for him. Things weren't going right. The press suddenly put him under pressure. The media. No one went at Harry Kane when he was just as bad. Really, maybe even worse, because he wasn't touching the ball. Son was always going looking for the ball. It was a case of dropping him when it should have been theory dropping Kane and putting Richarlison with Son, getting those two together, two workaholics who I think, knowing what Conte's like, that's what he likes. He likes players who want to work and at all areas of the park. But in general, they've just about got over the line, Spurs, in their performances and their results. The results have masked over some poor performances, to be perfectly honest. And United have really got to show a little bit more. This could be quite a terrible game in theory, because you've got two sides. This game normally is a big game when it's at Old Trafford. When Tottenham come in, it's quite, many have seen a bit of flamboyancy, two sides who have all those kind of players, the razzmatazz that go with it. But Spurs at the moment, I was at the Spurs v Wolves game and ended up staying behind. I was working, ended up being invited by a lot of the ex-players who work around the ground. I went into one of their boxes. Blimey, this box was like a West End blooming apartment. It was beautiful. So I'm in there with a lot of the old players, and one of their greatest players turned around and used the word saying, this must be one of the most uncreative Tottenham sides I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
That's what he said. That person, he played in central midfield for him for quite a number of seasons. So that's as far as I go with that. But it was, and I was there, and that's what I'd been saying. And when I worked that game on the radio, about I'd never seen a Spurs side who had lacked so many ideas in midfield. So United, I'm hoping that Eriksen's going to be fine to be able to play against his old team, because they're gonna need him, because the game's going to need Eriksen out there, by the way, because he will be the most creative player on that pitch.
Yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt, if he plays, and they're going to need him. And one thing as well, what they're going to have to create opportunities to score goals, and not maybe miss golden opportunities as they did yesterday, Manchester United.
Yeah.
So this game normally is one that is always marked on the calendar. Always, this game, Manchester United v Tottenham. It's not being talked about at this moment in time.
And yeah, you're quite right. In years past, this was like the entertainers' game, wasn't it? It was like, two teams are going to play football, and you just don't. I'm not saying United won't try and play, but you don't know what to expect. Apart from the fact that you don't anticipate a lot of entertainment, which is strange to say for one of those games. And that's going to be followed by Chelsea away. So we're going to be talking about two big games next week. Chelsea away. So it was a mixed start for them, and then they sacked Tuchel, and it was a bit of a shock when they sacked him. They hired Graham Potter, which possibly even a bigger shock considering the nature of the managers that they normally hire. And he's had a really good start to life as Chelsea manager. He obviously did fantastic things at Brighton. Everybody loved him there. He really rebuilt that club, but I mean, they've got a great structure there as well, Brighton. But he started really well at Chelsea. Notable wins against Milan as well. I know Milan aren't the force that they used to be, but you win against AC Milan and you win in the San Siro, then that's something to really take credit for. And it gives credence. We're very, very early days, like a month into it, but it gives credence to the idea that, maybe British coaches aren't terrible. Graham Potter has started really well, so it's going to be a massively tough game for you. It always is at Chelsea, but especially so because of the confidence that they're currently going to have.
Yeah, without a doubt, that game. So I just look. Chelsea have changed. The Tuchel situation was down more to the fact of, I think, the relationship with him and the new owner.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I think when a new owner tries to what he done to Tuchel after a game didn't make. I don't think any manager would have stood for it. So Tuchel said his piece, and that really added to everything. And he was never going to be able to work for that man. Graham Potter come in, and I think everyone was surprised how he's come up, but that must have been going on in the background, and he has made a difference. I think there's players have reacted well, and just prior to that, I'd been to a couple of Chelsea games and seen them, and they just didn't have any idea. They looked like they was never going to score a goal. Nice, pretty little stuff, but was never going to score a goal. I look at some of the signings. I look at Koulibaly and Thiago. Takes a really good side or good players around to get away with those two week in, week out, because you're certainly lacking pace. Plenty of experience. Yeah. One of them, a lot of experience in the Italian league, Koulibaly. Thiago, seems he comes out with pipes, slippers, and a smoking jacket on. It's just incredible how he plays a game of football. Never looks flustered, but he still needs energy around him. Got Aspilicueta to add in there as well. Tuchel seemed content to want to play that. Teams that wanted to go at you, they couldn't really deal with it constantly. But I just think now, given that result yesterday, which gave them a lift, even though Villa gave them a right good going over as well.
Yeah.
They're on a high at the moment, and especially at home, there's that little bit of belief now, where before under Tuchel they were losing that. But then as well, United don't mind a battle at the bridge, do they, really? It always is the fan. It's a massive game for Chelsea. The Chelsea fans will be making a lot of noise, because that game against Manchester United is a big, big game for them. And it's come at a time which they're mostly relishing at the moment, given their recent performance under the new man. And we know with Graham Potter at Brighton and what Brighton have done to United over recent seasons. Okay, results haven't always gone their way, but the way they performed, and they always outplayed Manchester United when he was a Brighton manager. He will try and change Chelsea and try and improve them on their ball retention, because the one difference between Chelsea ball possession and a Graham Potter's ball retention is that Graham Potter is always looking for progression. The likes of Jorginho will be passing more forwards than sidewards.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Like I said, Brighton did often outplay United when Potter was there. So with the better players, the better squad, he'll be wanting to sort of emphasise that legacy. We'll be back next week to talk about that game. If you've enjoyed the show, give us a like and subscribe on YouTube, and give us a rating and a review on the platform you're listening back on the audio podcast as well. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening, and thanks